Today in Studio 4, she reigns supreme in the nutritional medicine field. Health expert, medical researcher Lorna Vanderhaeg returns to talk with us about supernutrients and their impact on our brains and bodies. And pediatric plastic surgeon Dr. Cindy Vergere, who is the head physician in charge of the burn program at BC Children's Hospital, takes us into the operating room and through the life-saving, sometimes miraculous moments she experiences almost daily. And to begin the hour, white at the top, undesirables at the bottom. Filmmaker Professor Ali Kazimi talks with us about one of the most infamous events in Canadian history, the day in May 1914 when the Kamagata Maru, carrying 376 immigrants from British India, was turned away when it tried to land in Vancouver Harbour. Stay with us for Kazimi's new book, Undesirables, White Canada and the Kamagata Maru. Toronto-based filmmaker Professor Ali Kazimi was born and raised in India and has lived more than half his life in Canada. Since he was a young Muslim, he has been committed to the idea of building a pluralistic, inclusive, and just society, which is one of the reasons he spent 8 years making a documentary film about Sikhs, about a shameful time in Canadian history when Canada turned away loyal British subjects from our shores, many of them veterans of the British Indian Army. Kazimi's new coffee table expose examines history and asks some provocative questions. It is called Undesirables, White Canada and the Kamagata Maru. It is my pleasure to welcome Professor Ali Kazimi to Studio 4 to tell us more. What a journey for them and for you.
Yes, indeed. It's a pleasure being here. It's been a amazing opportunity to try and tell the story again in a different medium. So, as you said, I've done it once in a film and now a book. So
yes,
it's been quite
the
amazing.
continuous journey. And what changed for you when you did the book? What did you learn that you didn't know because the documentary was exhaustive?
Yes, but the book is a different media and gives an opportunity to expand on a lot of things that I couldn't do in a film. So you mentioned the British Indian Army, and this was a really important part of both the motivation for the people to come to Canada, but also it really defined how Canada responded to people. In fact, let me put it this way, how the British Empire told Canada to respond to people.
And it is very clear, deep-rooted racism in some very high places. So take me back, 98 years tomorrow.
Right. 1914, May 23rd, 1914, almost to the day, a Japanese freighter called the Kamagata Maru arrives in Vancouver Harbour, carrying 376 would-be immigrants from British India, most of them Sikhs, all of them, in fact, from the northwest Indian province of Punjab. They are posing a very direct question to Canada. They are saying, we are asking the British Empire, are we equal British subjects or not? If we are equal British subjects, then as imperial subjects, the empire has told us that we can move anywhere in the empire and settle anywhere in the empire. Now, Canada is faced with an enormous challenge, not just a local challenge of who it can let in, but also a global challenge, because the consequences of its actions will be felt not just locally and not just for the passengers of the ship, but also in India.
Okay, and the ship left Hong Kong, Japanese ship, left Hong Kong, piloted by?
Captain Yamamoto, but chartered by a wealthy Sikh businessman called Gurdit Singh, whose ambition it is he's been a contractor in Singapore, speaks fluent Malay, has lived there for decades, but he wants to do something for his fellow countrymen. And since 1908, he'd been watching Punjabi would-be immigrants stuck in Vancouver, because Canada in 1908 had passed a very simple regulation called the Continuous Journey Regulation, which said, to come as an immigrant to Canada, you must come by continuous journey from your country of birth or citizenship. Now, sounds, fair,
right,
and pretty broad and universal. there were two little addendums to that which were not made public. One was that Canada forced CP, Canadian Pacific, to stop its shipping lines between Calcutta and Vancouver. So now you couldn't make a continuous journey. The second thing,
small loophole,
just a little small catch-22, you know. So you had to make a continuous journey, but you couldn't really make a continuous journey.
Right.
Now, many European immigrants, remember this is a time when hundreds of thousands of Europeans are being enticed through serious marketing and propaganda campaigns to settle the West in Canada.
These would be white immigrants.
Exactly, white immigrants. So the desirable immigrants.
Yes.
And so there's a secret memo sent out to immigration officers on the East Coast, because some of them wonder, well, if this is, you know, how do we apply this on this side of the coast? So the memo is very clear. It says, you understand that this applies only to the most undesirable of all immigrants. And it was very clearly understood who the undesirables were.
And on this ship, veterans, men and 5 women?
5 women.
5 women who didn't fight for the empire,
No.
but they were British subjects.
Absolutely.
Mostly Sikhs?
Yes.
Hindu, Muslim?
Yes. 24 Muslims, 12 Hindus. But, you know, it's really interesting that while there is this, the history is in most part considered to be Sikh history, the response of the Canadian government was not simply towards Sikhs. I mean, South Asians at the time were simply known as Hindus.
Right.
Right.
All. Yeah, it didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
Whether you Bindranwala or the Golden Temple or anything like that.
No.
Just they're that color and they're all Hindus because they're from India.
That's right. And you couldn't call them Indians, because then you get into the slight problem with Columbus and Indians.
True.
You know,
and the Pilgrims.
And the Pilgrims. So Hindus they were. And in fairness, when you ask people from India, the colloquial name for India, one of the colloquial names for India is Hindustan.
Right.
So they were, therefore, if they were from Hindustan, they were Hindus.
And the leader of what was called in the press the invasion.
The invasion.
The Hindu invasion.
That's right.
Mr. Singh, Gurdeep Singh.
Yes.
What did he do when he arrived?
Well, he was a very fascinating, very charismatic man. He's in his mid-50s. He's already gray. He's got this great gray beard. He's got a wonderful sartorial sense. He wears very expensive, you know, tailored suits. Speaks English flawlessly. But he's also known to be an incredibly litigious man, and not afraid of taking the state to court.
Right.
Now, this is one thing that the Canadian government does not want to do. It does not trust the courts. So this is a very interesting and also a very cautionary tale for Canadians, I think, as a whole, of how the state can conveniently go beyond the rule of law. But the implications are far-reaching. So he tries to reach out to the press. He tries to, he basically calls the immigration authority and says, show me reason why. Tell me why I can't land. And he asks a simple question. If you're holding me, am I detained or not? Now, there's a telegram that I publish in the book, which has these 4 magic words on it, for me, that are really important. The superintendent of immigration says, ship not really detained.
Not really detained.
Not really detained.
But it could not land, and it was what, half a mile offshore?
Half a mile offshore, surrounded by armed guards. There's no contact with the shore. The press is not allowed, and members of the South Asian community on board are not allowed. But the ship is not detained.
Provisions, any help, food? When
the immigration authorities desire. So
I see.
Completely at their whim, so the ship is not really detained. The people on the ship cannot really move the cords.
No, but what about the captain?
the captain.
Japanese crew,
Yes.
Japanese crew,
Absolutely.
allowed to come ashore.
The Japanese crew is allowed to come ashore because they are simply crew. They have no desire, they have no declared desire
Right.
or intention to migrate to Canada. So therefore they're deemed to be safe. But also, Japan is a very powerful imperial ally of Britain at the time. Right? And there are these large geopolitics involved that are very serious. So during the course of the 2 months the Komagata Maru stays in the harbor, there are 2 Japanese battleships that steam into Vancouver Harbor and that are met with open arms and huge celebrations.
Okay, did they get into the money thing? Like any migrant coming to this country has to have so much money. So the law says $25 in each pocket.
That's right. $25 if you were a European immigrant. $200 if you were South Asian, or if you were not covered by treaty. So if you were a Japanese person at the time, you were covered by a treaty with Japan, so you didn't have to pay anything. If you were Chinese, you were covered by the Chinese head tax. That was $500 per person. So for South Asians, without identifying them, they were deemed to have $200 per person. And what Gurdit Singh says, I have the money, but what I've done with the money is I've bought coal, which I'm carrying as cargo. So let me sell the coal, and I'll pay you the money. But they say, no, you can't land, so you cannot offload the coal. Show us the money. So there's always this catch-22 and this cat-and-mouse game being played between the immigration authorities and the people on the ship.
Of course, and then there's the Prime Minister helping out. Was that Mackenzie King or Borden?
Borden. Mackenzie King was the young protege of Wilfrid Laurier, who wrote the Continuous Journey regulation, and Wilfrid Laurier is in opposition at the time. Borden is the Prime Minister. Now, Borden largely tries to divest himself of this. He wants his Superintendent of Immigration and the Department of the Interior to look after this. And it comes up a number of times in Parliament, if you look at the Hansard records. And the Liberals who are in opposition keep hammering away at him, but they hammer away at him in terms of process. You know, is there due process, is there procedure? But when they're asked, so would you let the Hindus in? And the response always is, no, sir, but I remain for a white Canada.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yes. Well, it's still shocking today.
Yes,
it really is. And the fact that, and we'll get into this after the break, about the union movement wasn't quite at the stage of demanding any kind of racial equality.
Right.
That too.
Right.
And they did send them back.
They did send them back.